The agenda this week scanned the economic indicators for the year ahead. We explored recommendations to overhaul regulation of Canada's digital ecosystem and looked at efforts to help youth leaving care access higher education. The agenda's Week in Review begins asking whether how Canadians save for retirement needs a major overhaul.
When pensions were introduced by Bismarck in Germany, they were introduced at age 65. People tended to die at 66, 67. So that was the original conception of pension plans. And even as recently as the 1950s, 60s, and 70s in Canada, we were living half as long in retirement as we are today. Right now, we're living 20 years past 65 on average, and we see that number increasing. Over the next 30 years, we expect the number of people over the age of 80 to triple.
I'd like to step back and look at the whole alphabet soup of options that the average Canadian is faced with cobbling together for their retirement, whether it's an RSP or a TFSA. Study after study has
OAS,
shown...
GIC,
OIS,
CPP.
Yeah, exactly.
You guys love your acronyms, I gotta say.
Exactly. Yeah. I think study after study and survey after survey has shown that, first of all, people aren't contributing on a regular basis to any of these programs, which is really critical. People need to start saving in the first place. And secondly, people need to start understanding that, these vehicles aren't just investment vehicles. They're vehicles that also require tax advice as well and real financial planning around it beyond, I think, what some of the other panelists have talked about, which is simply just investment advice.
Right, and truthfully, the reality is even when people are putting money in investment vehicles like RSPs, and this is something that people don't pay attention or spend time talking enough about, they're putting it in investment vehicles. They're not putting it in investment vehicles, they're putting it in savings plans.
Yeah.
Well, and let's say high interest savings accounts are kind of a misnomer because if they're earning 1%, it's a lot. And then they'll put it in there and they'll not think about it again for another year. Yeah. So 60% of Canadians are putting their money in like a high interest account or a GIC and not investing the money even when it's actually in an investment account like an RSP.
Well, Michael, I know you tend to, as the name of your organization would suggest, the National Institute on Aging, you tend to take care of people at the closer to the end of their lives than the beginning of their lives.
Well, that's where we start looking at it, but all those problems, if you have them saving for retirement, your health care, your personal well-being, it starts much earlier. So while we might be dealing with a bulge of older people now, that bulge, for example, won't stop. It's not going to end with the baby boomer generation. We're having fewer children. People are living longer. We could expect an aging population to persist in Canada. And so I think the message has to ricochet down to younger Canadians.
Having said that, how do you convince somebody who's in their 20s who will have a difficult time saving up enough money for rent or to buy a home or may have difficulty getting that first job that now is actually the time to start saving for your retirement?
Well, I think we have to go back to high school and the lessons of compound interest. If nothing else, set aside money. I think there's a lot of discussion now, and I think in this context of breaking apart the retirement income system in Canada, we have to remember that we're actually pretty good as a nation in being prudent and minding our finances. We weather the recession better than most, and so I think we have that ethic in Canada. And one of those is automatic savings, and you're starting to hear more discussions about that. Can we set up systems, and government might have a role to play in here, where we could have opt-in systems or opt-out systems, but where we develop a culture where saving automatically for retirement becomes the norm.
That has to happen, and I actually disagree with you. I don't think we're as prudent as we used to be when it comes to saving, not when for every dollar Canadians are earning, they're losing $1.70 to debt.
Yeah.
So I don't think that we have the discipline that we once had. I think we're becoming very, very comfortable with debt. And going back to what you were saying, I think mandatory workplace financial literacy programs, I think would be a really great place because that's one of the places that people gather and they typically have, if they're in a workplace environment where they have a savings plan set up already, sometimes what's happening is it gets set up but the provider never comes back and gives financial literacy sessions.
Can I just understand that? Because we're hearing a lot about high school literacy tests right now. You want something in the workplace.
Right, because there's many, there are companies out there that have employer-sponsored plans, retirement plans. They are set up. The the clients I deal with are faced with making decisions about where they should invest their money. They have no idea. They're not getting a lot of guidance from the suppliers on what they should be putting their money in. And maybe after the plan's set up, they're kind of left to their own devices.
But Alex, I hear all the time people talk about all these acronyms. I mean, we joked about it a second ago. All these acronyms that nobody knows what they stand for, and it's all very complicated. How you want to get through all that?
Well, there's one Nobel Prize winner that called retirement the hardest, nastiest problem in finance. And yet we have a system where we expect people to navigate a lot of that on their own. Yeah. And I think one of the common themes you've been hearing on the panel is we need to set up automatic pathways for people where a lot of those decisions are made for them in a way that puts their interests first. That part's really important as well.
Brett, I wonder if you could get us started in a bit of a discussion about the economic and financial factors you see out there affecting the Canadian economy over the rest of 2020, and perhaps what you see, no pun intended here, in the pipeline to help us deal with some of that.
Well, I think the most salient thing right now is that we saw a lot of weakness at the end of 2019, where our models are tracking zero growth in the fourth quarter of last year and a very soft handoff into this year. And that leads us to think that the Bank of Canada, which has really resisted easing monetary policy, one of the few major central banks that has, is probably going to move toward a couple insurance rate cuts this year. Now, of course, the worry is with incredibly indebted households that that's going to trip off even more borrowing. And the fact is that horse has already left the barn in some ways. We saw a huge increase in mortgage borrowing rates, and then at the end of the year, consumer borrowing. And in many ways, that reflects the point that you made that, capital markets have already brought interest rates down, particularly at the sort of 5-year term that is most important for mortgages. But very short-term rates remain a bit higher. And so if the Bank of Canada were to bring interest rates down, that would provide a little more cushion for business, which is really buffeted by all the uncertainty around trade, Brexit, coronavirus, and make it a bit easier for the businesses to fund themselves at the short end.
Brian, what are you seeing?
Well, I think that's true, and I think also that we should be aware that the Canadian economy is not performing evenly across all the provinces. We see good prospects for continued growth in BC, Quebec, possibly Ontario as well, but not in places like Alberta and Saskatchewan, where they continue to deal with the problems plaguing resources and plaguing shipment of oil, and that's going to continue.
And Linda, even, you can't even say Ontario. You really have to say Toronto and Ottawa, and, Toronto area and Ottawa. The rest of the province is certainly not enjoying the kind of economic conditions we're seeing here, right?
And, I don't think we should take it for granted that Toronto will do well if the U.S. economy goes down. We already are hearing that auto production is being affected by the coronavirus and Apple and other things, and that will spread through this part of the economy too. So the Bank of Canada is weighing a lot of different things. I don't think they can take anything for granted.
We get growth rates in the province of Ontario and then in Canada, I guess in general. What are we looking at? Like less than 2%, right? Since when was that considered terrific?
It's not. It's a kind of meh economy, but it's also not a recession. And you've had, people sounding this recession alarm for 6 or 7 years, saying we're on the edge of it, and they've been consistently wrong. And it's for a couple of reasons. One is that you have had that concerted policy support, both from fiscal and monetary authorities. And, as I mentioned earlier, when you look at the finances of the average household in the U.S. and the average business, they're in pretty good shape. And so, we've been buffeted by all the uncertainty from White House trade policy, but the fact remains we benefit from being right beside the United States, it being our biggest trading partner, and generally for every percentage point of growth that you get in the US, we get about half a percentage point here because of the demand for our goods and services.
So let me follow up with you on that. We've now got whatever you want to call it, NAFTA 2.0 or USMACA or...
See, the other one was the...
Yeah, what's the one that starts with when we put Canada first?
CUSMA.
CUSMA. Anyway, some of these acronyms get a little ridiculous. Do we have every expectation now that this deal has been signed and is done that it will be a net positive improvement to the Canadian economy?
Well, I think that's the question mark, and really what perhaps the Bank of Canada is waiting to see is whether there's business investment that follows and whether this period of uncertainty ends, whether at least in the immediate that this is enough of a strong enough agreement, a good, positive enough agreement that companies start to once again invest.
The burden of proof for change is incumbent on those advocating for it. I agree that it's a very disruptive time for media. I believe that there are genuine issues around access to online advertising and how that works internationally, et cetera, et cetera. I believe that there should be, that the solutions that should be targeted should be those at looking at supporting the next thing, not the last thing. I mean, this is a time, the internet is a time of incredible change. So, I mean, to use an analogy I've been using lately, this is like the introduction of the automobile, right? It made a huge change to the industrial infrastructure of the world in terms of that. But what we are trying to do here is to support horse and carriages, right? What we need to be doing is supporting the new world, not the old world.
Okay,
I mean,
let me get Murad in here.
It's frustrating watching that.
Let me get Murad in here. You're part of the new world, so go ahead. You respond.
Well, I actually that analogy I just want to pick up on because and to go back to something that Janet was saying earlier about sort of the CRTC needing to be forward-looking and seeing the change that's coming. So one of the things that happened with automobiles is that cities changed municipal policy, things like zoning laws, and basically ripped up what had been more sort of pedestrian-friendly areas to allow cars in. And now we're seeing the reversal of that. And I won't belabor this analogy for much longer, but the point I'm trying to make is that, seeing what's around the corner is the sort of basic problem of all policy making. A year ago, if you told me that there was going to be a version, a short video app that the Washington Post is on, TikTok, that's going to show up all over the internet and sort of take over youth culture. I don't think we could have predicted that. Should the CRTC or whatever version of we have it next, is the CRTC going to see TikTok coming? I highly doubt it. People in the industry didn't, and it's just. The idea that we can make rules for a future we can't see that are based on old rules, I think Peter makes a valid point, but I think he's sort of taking the wrong lesson from it. It is hard to make policy about the future. I do think we have to deal with the realities that we have now. And yeah, I work for a publication that has a subscription model, a very old school thing applied to the internet. We're doing it in new ways, but that's the way it is. These experiments are being conducted for sure, but at the same time, we are seeing this die-off of and there is a gap being created. I mean, those newspapers aren't all being replaced by community versions of the logic.
May I just make one quick comment?
Please.
I just want to make one comment about the need for a mindset shift on the part of users. So just as when it became possible online to start streaming music and people didn't worry about compensation for the artists and creators who created the music, we then said, well, for sure the business models are adapting, and that's a great thing because that's how technology and advancement works. But we started to recognize that it's not fair not to compensate them for the use of their creative content. That's the point we're making with news. And I think that we're trying to say that people have to understand that when they're posting those news stories on Facebook, they're not ensuring that the generators of that news, the journalists, the news organizations, they're not being compensated. And so our recommendations are trying to address that, and it requires people to start understanding that just as music and TV have copyright in them, so too does news. And we have to start to respect that and understand that if people don't like our proposal for how to ensure there's compensation, we're open to thinking about other ways. We think that the one we've come up with doesn't interfere with the business models of the future and is flexible and adaptable to change.
I'm a citizen of Métis Nation of Ontario, and when I was in foster care, my foster homes were filled with First Nations children. And
Where were you in foster care?
In Northern Ontario.
Okay. And how many kids would you typically have been with?
It was a typical foster farm, so what we mean by that is more than 4 children.
Okay. No, I've never heard that expression before. A foster farm.
Foster farm.
More than 4 kids?
More than 4 children.
Okay. And you were how old at the time?
Well, I was in and out of foster care because I would go back to my bio mom or biological mom. So that ranged from being I eventually was adopted at around between the age of 3 or 4. My adoptive parents, who were my foster parents, don't really recall the time. I think because the transition between being a foster parent and then being adoptive parent might have not been as abrupt as, say, someone drops a kid off of your house that you just adopted. And so my experience in that situation was just a feeling of othering. And so I felt that I was much different than the children of my adoptive parents.
So your foster parents were not Métis. They were not Indigenous.
My adoptive father's Métis.
Your adoptive father is, okay. As you look back on it all these years later, reasonably good experience, reasonably bad experience, what?
It was not a favorable experience. The feeling of othering is really isolating. It adds to the loneliness of my childhood.
Just follow up on that. The feeling of othering meaning what?
That you're different, that you're not necessarily part of this family because you're not a biological child, for example. So you feel different. It's either very implicit or explicit, the way that you're treated compared to the other biological children of the adoptive parents.
Got it.
And you carry that with you, kind of like an invisible backpack. You carry that weight of loneliness. And then over time, as you develop your own voice and you create your own community, you can feel less lonely.
I was going to ask, do you still feel it?
Yes.
You do? But you're a highly successful person these days.
That's right. I feel really happy and content with a dream that I had when I was a teenager. But it takes a long time to process this because I didn't have any support. I didn't have the skills to show me how to get rid of the stigma of being a foster care kid, how to get rid of that feeling of othering. So for me, it took a long time to process that, and I still am going through that.
Okay, thanks for talking about it. You ready?
Sure.
I want to talk to you about your background.
Yeah.
You ended up in care.
I did.
How did that happen?
Yep. So my family were escaping the horrors of communism, so they came to Canada for a better life.
They were from Czechoslovakia?
You know what? Czechoslovakia at the time, Czech Republic now,
Today,
of course, right? And I was born here, but I was raised within their home, so I spoke only Czech at home. I didn't have any exposure to Canadian culture at all.
You lived in Southern Ontario, but you weren't speaking English.
That's right. That's right.
You were how old when you learned English?
Probably about 6 or 7. And that's around the time that we got pulled into care, and they needed me to be able to speak in English to say what was going on at home. So I got an English teacher and a speech therapist, and I got pulled into a foster home outside of my community. So I was sent to another city for foster care. And then, of course, my foster home wasn't my culture, and it wasn't my language. So I understand a little bit about that, the newcomer kind of experience, even though I was born here.
Did you get that feeling of othering that we just heard described?
Yes. And I think that's really quite common. So you're always sort of participating in other people's family lives. So you're watching them sort of have their family life, and you don't really know where you fit in that. And then, of course, there's a lot of policies that disadvantage foster children sort of attaching to that home, because there's always this push to return them to their original family. And if you're bouncing sort of back and forth, you really never know where you fit, right? And then the other policies are things like, you know, respite for foster parents is highly encouraged, and that could be taken many ways, and I agree that that's an important part of the process. But in particular, that translates sometimes to, oh, well, we're going to go on holiday, and oftentimes the original children are included, and then the foster children go to other foster homes, as an example.
And that's just some of what we covered this week on the agenda. For more, including the full versions of each of those, you can visit our website. That's tvo.org. Our YouTube channel at youtube.com/theagenda, or our Twitter feed. That's twitter.com/theagenda.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.